I'm finally done with the uni semester and I finally have time to make a video. It's been 2 months since the last one, but oops, sorry, I couldn't really help. We are now halfway into the year. How's everyone's 2023 been? For me, this has actually been a really good year, both like personally and also reading goals, because so far I am on track to hit my 40 books. That does depend though if you do count Goodnight Pumpon as 1 book or 7. Goodreads says 7. I say 7 as well. But either way, I have a metric fuck ton of books to read for my next lit class next semester, so I'll hit it no matter what I do. For reference, my reading goal this year was 40 books, and so far, as of recording this video, I am 19 books in. However, 7 of those are manga. Actually, no. 8 of those are manga. Depends if you count those as one or multiple. It really depends on the series. For Goodnight Pumpon, I say it is multiple because they're thick volumes, and it's the same as if I was reading like a normal novel series. I feel like it's still very similar, but everyone's different on what they think. So 6 months into the year, 19 books down, I am here to decide my favorite books I've read so far, which actually has been really hard to pick because this year I've actually read so many good books. Compared to last year, I think this year I've definitely found my type of book and like what I enjoy reading, and I've been just reading a lot more. Like last year, I think, what was last year? Let's have a look. Okay, so 2022, my reading goal was 25 and I read 26. I'm on track to be at the same level, but I'm only halfway through the year, so that's actually really exciting for me. Out of the books I've read this year, I've decided to compile a few as my favorites, and I want to talk to you about them and hopefully get you guys to read them or to just see my point of view and why I love them so much. Book number 1. Technically, this one isn't 1 book. It's 7. And it's the Goodnight Pumpon series, which I've already mentioned on my channel, so I won't go too in-depth into. But I do finally have the whole series. And it has little Goodnight Pumpon on the side. Out of every single book, they've all been so amazing. I definitely have spoken about it before, so I won't say too much. But I did read this year. I started it in January, and I think I finished it around March, all 7 volumes. I'm so glad I picked this up. I don't normally read manga, but now I will. I've actually just started Berserk, which so far, very good. Everyone has recommended it to me, and I'm glad I'm reading it. But if I didn't read Goodnight Pumpon, I probably wouldn't be reading Berserk, so it's definitely pushed me on a different reading journey as well. Every single cover is just so beautiful as well. Like, that's volume 1. Volume 2. I'll do a close-up. I actually have been getting inspired a lot by the Goodnight Pumpon art style within the manga. All the like stills and panels are just stunning, and like when I watch them, I just can't help but admire Inio Asano's art style because it's just so gorgeous, and he puts so much detail on each panel. It's honestly insane. I have been drawing a little bit of Goodnight Pumpon stuff lately as well. I'll include some of it here, but I just fucking love it. Like, excuse my language, but it's just so good. The plot of the story is just so large and intense, and it's so realistic. It's very much a coming-of-age story that just captures all the darkness and the grittiness of adulthood and just, like, corruption and human nature, morals. It's just so good. It is very nihilistic. I actually found a running theme. A lot of the books I've been reading are pretty nihilistic. Even though I have taken a turn myself into a bit more of an optimist mindset. I don't know. I don't know what the correlation of that is, but it is interesting to think about. I won't go too far into depth with this book. If you want more, just check out my Books That Changed My Life video, and I talk a lot more about Goodnight Pumpon because it definitely had a big impact on me. And it's just a top tier book. Everyone should read it. I do think you need to be in the right mental state to read it, but I still recommend it to most people. My second favorite book of the year so far is one that won't surprise anyone who, if you know I've read it, you'll know it's up here, and also is a lot of people's favorite books. This may be cliche, but for a reason. And it is A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. What can I say about this book that hasn't already been said? Not much. I think the internet has just like analyzed and talked about this book so much that it's so hard to have a hot take or a new opinion, so I'm not going to try to, but I will explain why I like it so much. I think A Little Life is really interesting when you consider it as a character study and a look into these 4 guys who you follow from their uni days to late adulthood and eventually like to their old age, which I think is just such an interesting idea for a book. I love when you're able to follow characters from young to adult. Same thing with Goodnight Pun Pun. They both have that theme of like following from childhood, although this one starts in university, but going from younger age to older age and following the same character. I think A Little Life is such an impactful book because it does follow a lot of the trauma of the characters and explores a lot of the sadder parts of their lives, which, for the record, if you don't want to read this, I generally do recommend you read the trigger warnings first, because this gets intense. I remember reading it on the train and just being like, how I'm gonna cry on the train, I don't know what to do. And there were certain parts where I just had to shut the book because it was just too much and it was too graphic. I will say that is a bit of a fault of the novel I will explore later. I love the way in this book that you get to become a part of the world of these characters. By the end, I mean, for the record, the main characters are Jude, Willem, I think Malcolm, and JB. And you follow these people so closely that you almost feel a part of their friendship group, and you almost feel like you know them and they're people in your personal life. I'm definitely the only person who walked out of this book thinking like we love Jude, or like Jude is like very important to us as a person. I think that's an incredible compliment to the author. She is amazing at writing characters and writing lovable characters. Even a lot of the characters in this book are problematic and I do have faults of them. I'm still able to come out the book liking them, which props to her, that's hard to do. I think one of the things of this book that makes it the most appealing is the consistency between tragedy and beauty. There is a lot of different elements of this book. Some are very joyful and make you so happy, but then they become followed by these like deeply tragic chapters on pages of just like horrible things happening to our characters, which is very realistic for real life, because a lot of the time life isn't all happy and rainbows. There are a huge amount of tragedy in the world, and I think this book does a really good job at exploring that and having that pace. However, for my own sanity, I would rather they had a little bit more happiness in it. There is a whole chapter called The Happy Years, which, spoiler, not spoiler, I'm not sure. I don't think they're that happy. I thought they were horrible. But, oh well. I do think that there are some faults with this novel. I do think there's a lot too much, I do believe that there's too much trauma. Like, I understand what the author was going through for. She wanted to see, you know, the impact of all these horrible things happening to a character, but there are points where I'm like, this is, like, haven't these characters been through enough? Do we need to have this extra layer? And it just goes a little bit too far sometimes. Some of it I do understand. I'm like, this is here for a reason. This is here for the character. This is here for the development. And also, like, to give the audience a view of the horrible aspects of the world. There are some times I'm just like, that didn't, like, we've had enough pain and torture and trauma. Do we need this one more thing? No. Like, there are some parts that I do feel like shock value. There were times when I was reading it where I was like, this is so bad, but like, does this need to be here? Again, maybe if that's what you like about the novel, this is good for you. You're like, okay, I like these parts. The thing is, it's very difficult to read, and that is what it's notoriously known for, and it is like that for a reason. So I'm not sure, like, if this critique is warranted, but I do think that there are some issues in the portrayal of I don't want to spoil it, I don't want to give too much graphic information, but there are some intensely graphic scenes where I'm like, this didn't need to be this graphic. There are some other things that I won't go into because that's spoiler talk, but if you do want me to do an in-depth video on A Little Life, I'm more than down to, because I actually have quite a lot of opinions on this, and I think it's a very important text. That's a good text, but it's also a little problematic. But I still thought it was really, really good read, and I rated it. How much did I rate it? I forgot to give my rating for the first one. Oh my gosh. I rated it 4 stars. I don't think it's a 5-star. I think 4.5 or 4.75 is more accurate, but Goodreads doesn't let you do half stars. But I don't think it's a fully 5-star because of these slight problematic aspects. But I still thought it was really good. As for Goodnight Pun Pun, I gave it pretty much 5 stars for nearly every volume. It was really good. Okay, and my third favorite book, for the record, this isn't in any order. I didn't feel like ordering them. But book number 3 is also a classic, is also one that nearly everyone has read and loved. And I'm definitely not the first person to have a video or hot take on this. The Secret History by Donna Tartt. What the fuck? How have I not read this sooner? Donna Tartt is just, her writing, oh my gosh. Like, the way she writes is like, it's so fluid, and I feel like I'm like languid and like flowing through the story, which is so interesting because I feel like that's also how our main character, our main narrative, Richard Papin, is kind of progressing through the story. He's like languidly switching places, and like he smoothly falls into places without pushing himself, which is just like masterful in the way she writes. I actually am really surprised that I haven't read this sooner, since it's very much up my alley, and I actually have owned this book for quite a while. It's just been like sitting on my bookshelf. I finally decided to read it because everyone I know just loves this book, and it was just calling my name, and I'm like, you know what, Donna Tartt, it's your turn. And I'm so glad. Just the way she writes is just so gorgeous. It's just so beautifully written. Like, oh, I can't underestimate how amazing it's written. Like, it's just so gorgeous to read. And also, if you haven't read this yet, or if you have and you want to read it again, I 1,000,000% recommend you have the audiobook alongside. Donna Tartt's voice, she narrates it herself, is just, oh, chef's kiss. It's so good. And like, I think the way she narrates it perfectly fits the vibe of the book, and it sets the tone. I will play the first line. You would have, if you have TikTok, you would have probably heard her voice before, because there's like 2 very viral audios of her reading the prologue first line and then the chapter 1 first line. This is the first line of the chapter 1, and I love this intro. So weirdly in frame, and it's so much better when it's read by Donna Tartt. One thing I love about this book is the character dynamics and the way that each interact. And we start off with, before I go into the characters, I will go into the general plot. This is a satire basically making fun of elitism, and it's a very popular dark academia book, which I find hilarious because it's literally making fun of dark academia, and a lot of people don't get that. I have seen a lot of people who will read this book and they will romanticize it, and they will use it in their dark academia edits, and I'll be like, I think you missed the point. However, some of them don't, so I don't want to judge, but like, some people do miss the point horribly. But I will say it is a satire, and it is a very good satire. One that is so good that sometimes I forget it's a satire, and as you're reading it, you begin to fall into the trap of like agreeing with the characters or liking the characters, when in the end you finally, the mask comes down. You realize you're listening to an unreliable narrator. You're reading these horrible characters, and you think they're amazing. You almost fall in love with them, like the way that the narrator does. And as you get towards the end, you kind of get stuck in their trickery as well, and you become one of them. And then it just comes down at one point near the end, and you realize, oh, everyone in this book sucks. Like, they're all horrible people. I just think the way that it demonstrates like the problem with elitism and like rich kids who think they run the world, and who think like everything rolls around them, or that they can get away with everything. It's just so, it's so good. This is actually a lot of people's favorite books. The book I'm going to talk about next, the author, he likes this book a lot as well. But I'm just going to say, like, I understand why everyone loves this book now. I used to think, like, oh, it's, it's whatever, like, everyone loves it, it's a bit overhyped. No, once you read it, you understand why people love this. I actually started rereading it, like, a couple days after I finished it, because I just wasn't ready to leave it. I ended up listening to the audiobook again. I didn't finish it again, but I read, like, a quarter of it right after I finished it, because I just couldn't let go. If you're on the fence about reading A Secret History, I definitely recommend reading it. I intend on getting a better copy, though, because, like, there are so many gorgeous copies, and I feel like just having the Orange Penguin, as much as I like it, I need a good one. Okay, book 4, and before I mention this book, I will like to name some honourable mentions. I do think nearly everything I've read this year has been good, so there's a lot. But these are some of the books that I also loved this year, but didn't quite make my favorites. Jeanette McCurdy's I'm Glad My Mum Died. I did read it a little later than everyone else, but it was a very good book. Everything I Know About Love by Dolly Alderton. This book was just so gorgeous to read, and it was so much fun, and I just loved every part of it. And also It by Stephen King. That was a fat one. That was a big one. That was like over 1,000 pages, but oh my gosh, was it a fun 1,000 pages. Now onto the final book. This one is written by someone I actually know personally, and it is The Street Poet by Jade and Luke Attard. There are so many amazing things about this book that I just have to mention. The cool thing about this book is that it's independently published with the Backshed Press, which isn't that just a cool look. It was written by a Melbourne author who actually, he grew up in the same dodgy neighborhood as me, so we both have been through this like real dodge place of origin. But it is basically about exploring the streets of Melbourne, and it combines a lot of true stories and fictionalized stories of the people he meets in Melbourne, people of the streets, people he knows, and also there's also a lot of inspiration from this man he knows, Jay, which I thought was just so sweet when I read it. I love the way that you could see this clear adoration for someone in this book, and the care for like that craft and how that inspired him to write himself. So this has a very unique style of writing. It is more a combination of like poems and like short vignettes. I can't pronounce that word. It's more a combination of like poems and very short stories, and also there's a lot of art in here, photography. It's just really sick the way this has been made. I will show a close up of some of the parts of the book. A lot of it is like written in typewriter, which is just like so sick. There's a lot of like photography in here. Also a lot of collage. There is so much clear creativity that just runs through this book, and I just think it's so sick. And also the fact that it was like written by someone I know, and it's also just like made in Melbourne, just makes it so much better. As I was reading this, it did make me a lot more aware of like what is going on in Melbourne. It also follows a lot of like social issues like homelessness, class, prejudice that just like runs through Melbourne. And I love the care and compassion that is put into this in showing perspectives of people who don't often get voices. I thought that was just so beautiful the way it was done in here. There is clearly so much passion that went into this, and it shows in every single page. I can't exaggerate enough how much goes into this and how like full of life and passion and care this is. I say if you want to read this, definitely you should. I definitely think for like words to describe it, I'd say like very like gritty, very like underground Melbourne. If I'm gonna draw from English class, the word flaneur comes to mind. I just think this is incredibly interesting. Like I've never read anything like this before. The format of it, I often don't read poetry. I mean, I do sometimes, but not a lot. Like a lot of these stories, there are like running things that connect them, and they're so. One thing that adds to it so much is that all these people, like a lot of these people are real people who like exist in Melbourne. And as someone myself, I frequent the city quite a lot. I've seen some of these people and I'm like, yeah, I know that guy. Like there's one part of this of like this cult leader who hangs outside State Library where I'm like, I know that guy. I think everyone knows that guy. But I just think it's so interesting, and especially I would love to see what it's like to read this if you aren't from Melbourne, because I just think that's like such an interesting introduction to the city. There is also just like such a love for the city. Like you can tell he just loves Melbourne. It almost is like a love letter to Melbourne. It gives so much care to the topic, and it shows a large amount of research, a large amount of depth, and it's just like, whoa. Also, just like sick cover. Like what the fuck? Like, that is so sick. I love the ransom, that's what it's called, the ransom cutouts and the art like that. Would this not look amazing on your shelf? I think if you liked The Man of the Crowd by Edgar Allan Poe, you would like this book. They're very similar in tone, I reckon. I'll put a link down below of where to buy it. I definitely recommend it. If you live in Melbourne, this is like a must read. Okay, so those are my top books so far. I hope you've either read them and also liked them. If not, let me know what your favorite books were. I'm actually very interested in what people are reading. I always want to know. As for what's next, I'm currently reading Berserk. Also, sorry if there's so much background noise. There's like a lot of like construction going on in my house. As for what's next, I am currently reading Berserk and New Grub Street, which are both pretty good. Very, very different books. Very different, but they're both very good. I've also got a metric fuck ton of books ahead on my schedule for my lit class. I'm just gonna list all of the books I have to read for next semester. I might cry because there's literally so many, and some of them are like literally over 900 pages. This is what happens when you do a lit degree. Yeah, I'm excited to hopefully find some new favorites. By the end of the year, I can make a new top books of the whole year. That'll be very exciting. I hope you liked my return. I know I've been gone for 2 months. Uni has been really stressful. I've been meaning to make a video, but I couldn't. I actually did make a video, but I wasn't able to post it because the file got corrupted, and also I just didn't like it at the end. So I hope this makes up for my lost time. Thank you so much for watching. I very much appreciate it. Next up, probably a book haul. Please leave me a comment on what books you plan on reading, and also what your favorite books of the year were, and I'll see you next video.